Good morning. Welcome to episode 4 of The Business of Writing in Romance. As we record, it's the 2nd of July, 2016, and we're your hosts. I'm Rachel Herron.
And I'm Carolyn Jewell. Today we are going to talk about some definitional and foundational issues. Probably most romance writers are going to be fairly familiar with this, but if you're new to romance, some of this information will help you find places for more information and have a little better understanding of the things we're going to be talking about going forward. So I thought we would start with the definition of romance. So I'm going to read the definition of romance from RWA, which is Romance Writers of America. And I guess I should add in our disclaimer that I am currently on the national board of RWA, so anything I say, I'm speaking for myself personally and not on behalf of RWA. So here we go. The definition of romance from RWA. Romance fiction is smart, fresh, and diverse. Whether you enjoy contemporary dialogue, historical settings, mystery thrillers, or any number of other themes, there's a romance novel waiting for you. Two basic elements comprise a central love story and an emotionally satisfying and optimistic ending. Romance novels may have any tone or style, be set in any place or time, and have varying levels of sensuality, ranging from sweet to extremely hot. These settings and distinctions of plot create specific subgenres within romance fiction.
Awesome. And I think that the biggest, like the two things that I always think about for romance are that it focuses on the developing romantic relationship and has an optimistic ending, right? To me, those are the two biggest
Those
things.
are the two, yes.
Yeah.
If there's no happy ending, it's not a romance.
Yeah. It can be happy for now.
Well, I would say, speaking personally, that if the book ends with this couple is in a relationship, I think there are some purists who would say that happy for now is not enough for them.
Yeah.
But,
I always really like happy for now because it seems to be really truthful, But I do like that kind of realism too.
Yeah. I think that happy for now is probably I don't want to use the word convention, but something that works really well if you're going to have a romance that from the same couple that tracks through several novels.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, which I don't think I would ever try to pull off personally. Have you ever done
that? I have not, partly because I just don't have a series in my head that fits that.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are authors who do, so I wouldn't say never, but one of the things I really love about writing romance is that happy ending at the end of the book.
Yeah.
And that progression of the romance, like to that point. I love that, and I would be sad if I wasn't writing a book that achieved that. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, sure.
I kind of wanted to go over, let's see, we've talked about whether we agree with that definition. So,
mm-hmm.
So potential, let's talk about a couple of things. There was a book a while back that had, like maybe 3-4 months ago, that had people up in arms because at the end of the book, the couple was deceased.
Both of them?
Yes.
Wow.
However, and it was billed as a romance. And so based on that, there were a lot of people saying, well, what?
Okay, let me clarify with you. Were they ghosts all the way through, or did they die at the end? We won't tell the name, so we won't give it away.
Well, I guess we can't continue the discussion if I don't give away kind of the end, and I'm not sure that. So anybody who hates spoilers, since I'm not actually naming the book,
right? Let's not do that.
Maybe it won't matter.
Yeah.
So I talked to someone who read the book, and she gave a very different description of that. Very true, the couple were dead at the end of the book. However, there was an epilogue last chapter in which they were reunited in heaven for their happy ever after. So, to me, that's That's the optimistic ending.
Totally. I agree.
Um,
Yeah.
so I have not read that book, so I guess I can't say if I agree with this other definition, but that is very much like J.R. Ward's Vicious book, in which the heroine dies, and his relationship with her is with her as a ghost.
Yeah.
Um, so still having a relationship several books later.
Yeah.
So there you go. And possibly the more interesting question about this other book is, does that qualify as inspirational in the sense of having a religious or spiritual tone? And although it
Yeah.
wouldn't the CBA market, which is the Christian Book Association, I think that's um, it certainly fits the definition of an inspirational romance, because what is more spiritual or religious with an emotionally satisfying ending than a couple who was reunited in heaven for their happy ever after.
Totally.
So that's very interesting to me. So, and we kind of, so that kind of leads us into this of, the scope of the romance genre.
I think we're in a unique genre, and I think that for a lot of reasons, but romance is a genre, and we fit into it. But romance as an idea slips into all the other genres. And even if romance is not at the forefront of a mystery or a thriller or a science fiction, it can be and often is in there. So I think what we do in the romance genre is kind of heighten that. But I love how we fit in everywhere. What do you think? It's not like science fiction accidentally ends up in a historical, Scottish romance. Science fiction doesn't
Yeah.
slip its way in there. Thriller doesn't slip its way into everything that we do. You know, so I think that makes it maybe more human. More about the way we want to live and love. We want to have love in our lives. Everyone does. What we long for as people is that connection with one other person, heart to heart, or two or three, or whatever you're writing.
My reaction to that, the first thing that leapt into my head is uh, the Lord Peter Wimsey series by Dorothy Sayers.
I'm not familiar.
Um,
Those are mysteries, right?
yes. So they were, written in the 1930s or 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and he is the son of a duke, and he meets, I believe book one is Have His Carcass, Carcase, because it has to do with there's ball. Um, and there's this wonderful romance between the heroine of the book, Victoria Violet, oh my God, and Lord Peter Wimsey. And it carries on through several books. And that was one of the reasons that I started to love Dorothy Sayers. It was my entree into some mystery that I,
Yeah.
really like. But what I responded to was that really strong romance, watching the two of them fall in love, across that book, and then several other books. So as you say, there's a book without any romance at all is kind of rare
Mm-hmm.
in fiction. In
Mm-hmm.
fiction.
And for me, it's not as much
So
fun
there's
to read. I really want some kind of romance angle, even if it's just a hint of it. And in fact, I've argued with people after movies, trying to think of one, like an action movie of some sort, and I will have identified with the longing glance
mm-hmm.
that was cast. Oh, I can name something really specific. The latest Mad Max, which I
Oh yes,
loved. I loved.
yes.
I've argued with several people about that. The look that without spoiling anything, the look that Max gives Furiosa at the end when she's standing on the platform and he's down there, and they have that look. And a bunch of people have told me, well, they have that look because they've had an intense experience together and they know that each other is strong. But I will maintain that there was something super sexy in there too. What do you think about that?
I totally agree.
But is that because we're romance purists? Because we want to see romance in everything? I know I do.
Well, probably. Maybe there are people who really hate that, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Well, I guess I would say I'm not sure why people would run away at the very hint of romance, but it's all wrapped up in our feelings about uh, how we perceive uh, media aimed at women or any subject matter that is supposedly, feminine.
Yeah, yeah,
There is a lot of people who simply, run screaming from that because they're going to get girl cooties. But men fall in love as well, and I
yeah,
don't believe it's a fundamentally different experience for a man than it is for, you know, a woman to fall in love, no matter who they're falling in love with.
right.
Uh, so why, when we think about romance novels and having people, characters falling in love, that is like a cootie book.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but it's not when George R. Martin is, having love stories across books and stories.
right, right. Well, then we can look at the statistics too. 46%. Look at my notes. 46% of all mass market sales are romance. That's
Hmm.
more than science fiction and mystery put together. There's a
Yeah,
reason that romance is the biggest genre, right? It's what we want to see and what we want to think about.
yeah. And I also think it's wrapped up in, one of the things I think that is fundamental to the popularity of romance, and probably is an important thing to keep in mind for anybody who wants to write romance, which is the lives of women, particularly, I guess I can only speak to, the Western world, but probably it's very near universal. But the lives of women are jam-packed with responsibilities and things that take them away from, pursuing something that they do only for themselves. So in addition to having jobs, you're also responsible for the emotional well-being of your home and your family.
Hmm.
And you come home and you work at your job where you have to navigate this really difficult landscape of, you know, the creeps in the office. Who are the people who are going to have a problem? How do I relate to them so that I can get my job done and do a good job? And then you come home and it's like, oh, now we have to care for the family, and there's all those responsibilities. And sometimes you're caring for, aging parents as well on top of that. And it's
Yeah.
just, it's exhausting. And I hear from so many readers, and I'm sure you hear the same thing, that they're just grateful to have this space where they can read and it is safe. There's nobody within that space of a romance book saying, you went out and look, you wore a short skirt and you deserved
Right.
everything that happened to you
Right.
because of that. Um, it's just that safe space is so critical, and it doesn't really exist,
Yeah.
um, unfortunately for women. And I think that's a big reason, that
Gosh, that's
that
huge.
romance. And so, if you're writing a romance, it behooves the author to keep that in mind. Um, and I think it's great that there's more men, writing romance, and some of them are doing great. We got at least one male, Rita finalist, this year. That's pretty exciting. Matt Bachman.
Okay. And is that the first time a male
I
has ever?
I don't believe so. I think Harold Lowry, who's
Oh, okay.
a past president of RWA, was once a Rita finalist. Uh, so it doesn't mean men can't write romance. It's
Right.
just
Right.
that, I think a man who writes romance has to be, hopefully, some time or just developed throughout his life to look at things from the female point of view, instead of simply assuming that he can reflect back.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to see that changing a little.
Yeah. What I'm thinking really is interesting about that too is that a man would have to keep in mind that safety that women want from this, and that's something I'd never thought of before. I told you that I released my book on the market this week, and it is a reality TV book set in the same world, Darling Bay, that I've been writing in for a long time. And I realized that when I sent out my newsletter about it, when I blogged about it, I realized that what I was loving so much about writing this series is that reality TV, no matter what people say about it or what people think about it, I think that I have this theory that everybody has one reality TV show that they will admit to liking, whether it's the Great British Bake Off or Project Runway or, whatever angle you want to take into it. I think that, you know, some of those Real Housewives are really mean, and I don't want to watch that kind of thing. But there's a bunch of really great reality TV, and what that is for us is a pure escape from our lives. We're not watching something like The Americans, which is scary, and stressful. We're watching something that is somebody else's life that we can escape into, and that's what we do with romance sometimes, but in this really, really safe way. And I think that particularly right now with all the news that's coming on in the world, it's really nice to feel safe and to sink into a spot that we fit into. And I've heard from some readers this week who finished the book and felt the same way. Just really nice to stand next to their own experiences and be somewhere else for a minute.
Yeah, I don't watch much TV.
Yeah.
Um, close to zero.
Good for you.
The only time I watch, my son's home for the summer, and we haven't watched anything yet. But sometimes I'll, watch some TV with him. We do have a Netflix subscription now because we have improved internet at home,
Yeah.
so we can actually do that. So on Netflix, the only thing I've watched recently is binge watching Jessica Jones
Oh, that's good.
and Sense8,
Yes.
and the first season of Daredevil. I haven't done the second season. I was busy cleaning out my office at one point because that was such a huge project. Because I was getting a new desk, and I would like take these boxes of stuff to go through and figure out, discard, keep, and I would just sit in front of the TV with Jessica Jones and get that taken care of. So I'm kind of.
And those are definitely not, I mean, they're kind of escape, but those are not light, easy shows. None of those.
That's correct. But what I loved about Jessica Jones was her resilience and her self-sufficiency. She went and she
Yeah.
saved herself.
Yeah.
And so even when she was paired up with Luke, she was in there like carrying the burden equally, at least equally. And it was just like, thank God, because when I sit down and watch any TV, most of the time I'm appalled. Appalled at the misogyny that's just inherent in so many of the ways women are characterized on those shows. And it's like half the time after finishing watching anything like that, I want, just please give me a great romance novel where that is less likely to exist. Which is not to say that there aren't romance novels that embed some of those heavy gender roles that I disagree with, because some romance novels have made me pretty ragey.
Well, it's an enormous market, but what your statement brings me right back to the Sarah Wendell of Smart Bitches. Her quote that I always quote in my classes, which is why feminists read romance, is it's a 50-plus-year-old industry comprised mostly of women writers operating their own businesses and producing a genre about women's self-actualization, pursuit of autonomy, and acquisition of sexual agency for an audience made mostly of women who buy over $1.4 billion worth of books a year. No, there's nothing feminist or even subversive about that.
Yeah. It is. Well, it's interesting in this environment that now, there are more people paying attention to romance because now that it's traditional publishing isn't the only answer. It is, or I should say, venue for publishing. It's been a little harder to disguise the fact that it is women and stories about women, and there's been some backlash against all those ridiculous, like, oh, I read one romance 80, 50 years ago or 1 year. Or I read about a romance, and now I can tell you all about how, romance is for stupid women because that's what women are, and there's been backlash against that and this whole genre of in academia about studying that and kind of pointing out the many problematic statements there.
Yeah.
So let me ask. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So now that we've kind of discussed, romance is big, and you can tell basically any type of story that encapsulate this happy ending. So for someone looking at writing romance, what do you think? What advice do you have for them in terms of getting their feet into the genre?
Well, my first response is always to read, 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 read. There's so many lists out there of what people think are some of the best romances, and I think those are really good places to start. I cannot respect easily anyone who jumps into this genre without reading and loving romance. I really think that it will show, and maybe I am deluded about that, but I think that I would be able to tell if I think readers can tell when they're being pandered to, you know. So I think reading is huge, and I do think that someone just getting into the romance genre should join RWA. I mean, I can say that because I'm not on the board, and I mean, again, I learned more in my first 2 years with RWA than I did in grad school about the business and industry of writing in general, not just writing in the romance genre. What about you? What would you recommend people do?
Well, I would say this, and I think it segues neatly into the one of the questions we were considering discussing a little later, and that is like this connection. And did we know other romance
Mm,
authors at the time we started writing? And so I started writing in 1987, pre-internet,
right.
pre. I certainly didn't know RWA existed. I had no way of I had no idea of what was out there, and I didn't know any other writers, let alone any other romance authors, other than by name on the cover of their books. Um, and it was very isolating.
Mm-hmm.
And once the internet came about, um, and I could join like RWA and a local chapter, um, boy, just everything changed. I could be on these loops, and there was just all this support and information, and it changed everything because writing can be so isolating.
Yeah.
I mean, you sit in a room and you're in your head and you're going, "Oh my gosh, how do you even like somebody to read your book and tell you whether or not you've like, you know what, the whole middle is boring, you need to fix that." I mean, how
Yeah.
do you find that? And RWA makes that so much easier, and it's this supportive, generally female environment again. So you don't have to. So much of what women have to deal with is how to interact with the men that surround them, and you have to identify when are safe for certain topics, which men are going to have power over you in some relationship aspect. Um, and when you're operating in an environment of women who just, I mean, they typically just get it.
Did I ever tell you about when I went to RWA for the first time?
No, please do.
Oh my gosh, I had never been to a local meeting at all. I basically heard of RWA. I, and I immediately Googled it because I'd written this romance, and I think I was trying to attract an agent, and I think I hadn't quite got my agent. Oh, because RWA was in July, and I got my agent in August, I remember. So I was right at that point in my career. My first book was done, and I was trying to get it out there. Googled RWA. There was not a meeting in San Francisco area coming up because it was the National. And the National happened to be held in San
Right.
Francisco. So instead of going
Oh,
to a meeting,
so this was 2008?
it must have been 2008. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
my first meeting was taking Bart across the bay and walking into this hotel where I thought, I just had all the traditional stupid ideas in my head where these, kind of fusty looking librarian women, which, librarians are sexy. But, in my wrong-headed head, I thought I would walk into a group of, seven women from far, far in the Midwest who wanted to talk about romance novels. And instead, I walked into the most exciting convention rooms I'd ever been in. And I proceeded to walk around the RWA National and go to all the, the workshops that I could possibly find. And I was so shy that I could barely talk to anybody. And I was just completely overwhelmed with the amazingness of it. And I went to the Ritas. I didn't know what the Ritas were. I'd never heard of them, but I saw it on the program and I thought, okay, I will go. And in the San Francisco hotel where it was held, the Ritas were downstairs in a ballroom, and there was this escalator that came down to where everybody was waiting to get into the Ritas. All the women in their beautiful, beautiful dresses. And there was one chair, there was an armchair that was kind of tucked in a little nook. It was just for one person, and I hid myself there. And I had a view of the escalator. And all of these women who were so beautiful, so smart, I've been talking to them all weekend, in the bathrooms when I would get up the nerve to. Um, they were gliding down this escalator, and I would say that half of them had glasses on, like me. And I felt like I was at the most perfect prom I'd ever been to. And I just sat in that chair by myself and cried as I watched these incredible women that I had never known about. And actually, at the Ritas, I met Alice Gaines, who's a romance writer that we know. She's in the
She
San
is
Francisco.
awesome.
She's incredible, and she said we met at Starbucks. I think we were in the line before the Ritas, and she said, "Well, you live near me. I'll pick you up and I'll take you to our first meeting." And so she took me to my first San Francisco RWA meeting. But just to see that the glamour and the crazy, sexy smartness that was RWA from an outsider perspective. I didn't have any friends. I was just watching everything. It was truly, truly a huge change in my life. It changed everything. Yeah, so that was magical to me.
So my first RWA, I actually it was also in San Francisco, but it was in 1990 or 91.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a member. That was how I found out about RWA. I had dinner, my editor, and I can't remember if she had already moved from St. Martin's Press to HarperCollins at the time, but she said, "Hey, I'm going to be in San Francisco. Let's have dinner." So I met her, and we had dinner, and there was another author there, and we had, this lovely dinner, and this editor. So she was telling me, oh, she was here for this RWA conference, and she said to me, "You don't need RWA." And I remember thinking in the back of my head, no, this sounds exactly like something I need. And we had a lovely conversation, and then shortly after that, I joined RWA. Holy cow!
And look at you now, you're on the board.
Other romance authors
that I could talk
and,
to in person?
Yeah. And then my actual first conference that I attended was in 2000. And that was a New York City conference. And it was an experience kind of like yours. I was going, oh, what am I doing here? There's so many people. And then it was so amazingly energetic and energizing and inspiring. And I was going to every single workshop that I could and meeting so many people. It was just an amazing experience.
And you wear that first timer ribbon, and that, I think that's how I met people, was people were talking to me, and I didn't have to make that overture because the romance world is so friendly. This actually brings up a question that we were going to talk about. Why do we think romance is such a great genre for writers, particularly?
I think there's a few reasons for that. One is that it is a genre that is so broad that no matter your interest area, whether you actually kind of like mystery or thrillers or science fiction or something that you're inventing on your own, there's a place for it in romance, as long as you're adhering to that definition. And I also think that because there are so many readers, even a niche romance market can be profitable for the author who wisely positions herself. And I think that's far and away one of the biggest reasons. Now, the downside to that is it is very competitive. So, you have to rank competitively and get high in those romance rankings. You have to be moving a lot of books. But there is, decent money to be made even at those lower levels, despite the competition. But I also think that competition is really good for developing as a writer and a business person.
I think so too. Yeah.
The cover bar is really high now, and I think that's a great thing because it just adds to you can't tell the difference now with a savvy self-publishing author. You cannot tell the difference between self-published and traditionally published covers by and large.
I agree.
And the same is true of the resources available. I mean, authors, and again, membership in RWA will help you find people who've had good experiences with editors and copy editors, and hey, try this, and just this information that you have. And there's so much information shared within the romance community. So many places, whether it's RWA or some of the email loops that have to, and Facebook groups that have to do with the writing of romance. And all of that can really position you to succeed, either broadly in romance or in the niche where your writing fits.
Interestingly, I think it ties directly in, as traditional publishing is shrinking. There have been these layoffs that have occurred all across the board in publishing, and those truly talented, worth big bucks people like editors and copy editors and graphic designers, those people are available for hire nowadays, and we can find them. And I think that's part of the reason that that bar has gone up, is that there's not just one editor that everybody wanted to hire. There's a lot of them who really know what the heck they're doing.
Um, so I have a couple of thoughts about that. I absolutely agree with you that there are now people who edited for New York who have hung out their shingle and either moonlight or have simply moved directly into editing, um, you know, for self publishers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a bonus. There are also other editors who have never been New York editors, which in some ways can be a bit of a bonus because they don't bring that preconception of uh, what they believe is the mark romance and what's required in a traditional romance. So you can also find editors who are not, I don't want to say burdened, but let's use that word, burdened by some of those traditional ideas about marketability, because I do feel that traditional publishing has those ideas are work in for them in traditional publishing, and we could argue about whether or not they're really working given some of what's going on in publishing now, but certainly
Right.
there's a place for different stories, and self-publishers can take advantage of that. And again, that is exactly why it's so great to be writing in romance right now, because you can occupy both those spaces, traditional and self-publishing, or pick one or the other.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You know,
not
go on.
not to mention, I do want to mention this, particularly now in romance. There never used to be much of a market for short stories and short fiction, and there is within the self-publishing realm.
So cool.
'Cause I have success with that, and there are novellas, and that you're not bounded by these traditional ideas
Mm.
about how long a book has to be, which is essentially driven by the cost of a mass market paperback. Oh, it has to be this many words because otherwise it won't fit into this page length that keeps the book profitable.
Right.
So if your natural story range is 60 to 70,000 words, which is a little short for mass market, uh, it doesn't matter.
Right. Right.
And if like those 120,000 words, you're not really, no one's going to say, could you please cut, this down like, 20,000 words.
Right. Right. What else is really interesting about the way I look at romance and the way and how I started is I started writing romances, and then I moved over and wrote a few mainstream novels. I've got 3 out. And I will always argue that by learning how to write romance, I learned how to write almost everything else. Um, the my second mainstream novel is called Splinters of Light, and it's about a twin sister relationship, and it is non-incestually the love story of these two sisters, and it hit every note that I had learned to write in romances of wanting different things, needing to come together, absolute betrayal and disappointment, and everything is broken going into how do we fix it. I did the same thing with my last mainstream novel, which was the story of two friends. Exactly the same thing. It's a romance of everything except the romantic love and sexual attraction, but everything else, relationship wise, is what we want to read in terms of hitting all the notes of conflict and resolution.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
For the person looking at writing in the romance genre, and as someone who's written outside it, in terms of developing your writing chops, how do you feel about bridging like traditional teaching of writing methods and this crucible of learning it within the context of this of the romance community?
I think personally, the context of learning it within romance for me was crucial to learning how to write a story. Period. My second novel, but I think a lot of people have that magical first novel because we are Western and we have seen story over and over again in movies and the books we read. So we accidentally write this novel that hits the notes and succeeds. And then when we try to do it the second time, that's why people talk about those second book blues. You realize on your second book, when you're under contract, you have no idea how a story is actually put together. And I think that romance writers, as a rule, are much smarter and more educated about how stories are made and put together. But I had to sit down and learn how to do it for my next 4 romance novels. And that was serious training ground in story, which has served me in every single other thing that I've written, including the mainstream novels, including things like nonfiction essay, like the formation. I still go for the midpoint turn and the black moment and the resolution at the end. Like I still rely on all that, and it's. I mean, I think that some people would say, well, is that formulaic? And I think I argue that it's kind of the opposite. There's that freedom within constraints. You know, if somebody tells you to write a story, write a novel, you can't write a novel. You can't just think of an idea. But if somebody tells you to write a novel about a clown and a kitten with 3 legs, suddenly you have somewhere to go because you have creativity within constraints. And I think that's what romance did for me.
So one of the things, sort of looking back with the benefit of hindsight, is when I started writing, when there were so few resources, I probably, you would say, had that sort of sophomore book happen with what would have been my third book, or what turned into my third book. And it definitely happened. And again, that was at a time where I was very isolated because I hadn't found the romance community yet. And I think I mentioned this before. I had been reading all these books by academics and non-romance writers about how you write fiction. And boy, none of that worked for me. And it wasn't until I was in the romance community that I started, hearing about the concept of pantser versus plotter. And boy, for a while, well, let me back up and say, I solved my third book problem by saying, well, I don't care what all the books say anymore. I'm going back to how I wrote my first 2 books, and which is totally pantsing. I didn't have those words then, but I know that now, seat of the pants, and went forward, and I've written that way ever since. But within the romance community, it's not a conversation. Pantsing versus plotting and the continuum in between is not a conversation I heard at all when I was in graduate school and taking rhetorical theory. Not one single book ever approached that idea of, no, it's not, you have your brain bubble idea or whatever. Or, you must free write, or you must, outline extensively. It's this concept of, no, it's a continuum and you can be anywhere on it. And as long as the book is getting done, your method is valid. To me, that was so freeing, because there's a part of me that's like, well, what is the way you do this? And there isn't one answer. And the support for that within the romance community is so amazing. And it really freed me in my writing life to go, okay, within the story that I'm telling, my approach to it is going to be this, and it's going to work, and it does work, and it continues to work, and I can have continuing conversations with other authors about what they do.
That's really interesting that you say that, because in every writing area that I'm in, whether it's conferences or workshops in other areas, you never hear the thing that romance writers always say. When you hear a romance writer teaching, they always say, "This is my way. This is the way it works for me. This may not work for you." You hear that over and over again, and I don't hear that in other
Yeah.
writing arenas. When you're presented with the way to do something, you are told that this is the way to do something. This is the best way because we figured it out. Romance writers are really open and saying, "Well, I have the best way for
Oh,
me."
I completely agree.
Yeah, yeah.
And I will say that, I have this deep love of office supplies.
Oh, me too.
Um,
That might
boy,
be
I
across the
love,
board.
markers and highlighters and post-its and all those kind of, look at those pens, they're so colorful, and
Yep.
here's all these things that I can do, and they don't work for me, and that is like my biggest regret.
That's
Is that this
terrible.
office supply driven thing does not work for me.
Me,
It's just
me and post-its. I could literally sleep on a bed of post-its. I use so many. Like they fall out of my hair. I can't work without post-its. But I bet 95. This is probably the biggest percentage
I'm
we'll ever
still
guess.
looking for the pantser method of using office supplies.
We need to make it up. We need to make up the Panther method of office supplies. I think it might entail a gigantic whiteboard and 12 different colors of dry erase markers. Listeners, I remember when I taught a workshop or something, I can't remember where it was. It was maybe up by you somewhere, and I don't remember what I was talking about, but I was saying basically I was showing the class my method of revision. That's what it was, and I said something like, "Well, I'm basically a pantser." And Carolyn Jewell was in the audience. She goes, "You are not a pantser. You are a planner. Look at all those notes in your post-its. You're a planner." I think you were the first person to call me out on that. I thought I was totally a seat of my pants on my 365 post-its, and I still work that way.
I
Well,
remember when I was writing a book and I was going to use this. I had read somebody's, story about how they use post-it notes to plot scenes. And I'm going, oh man, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go. And I went out and I bought these colorful post-its, and I'm like trying to write this, and it's just up there, and it was just this on the wall, and I'm writing stuff down, and I'm going, this is such a fucking waste of time. I can't use all these post-its. And so for a while, I used my stack of colorful post-its as a coaster because I probably still have those post-its. I have never used them, and it's
that's what a waste of post-its. You need to give those to
I
me.
know. I wish I'm still searching for how I can have cool office supplies
Yes. You
because
know,
I know there's
thinking
this
about
other.
office
Go ahead.
supplies, I think that maybe that is the universal for writers is the reason we love office supplies, and the reason we get high on the fumes at Staples is or Office Max is that it's because there's all this potential in there, right? And as writers, and I think a lot of times as frustrated writers, when you're not really writing the way you want to be writing, there's that promise of the new pen or the new notepad or the new system, like you're talking about, that may free that.
Yeah.
Because honestly,
Yeah.
the lure of Staples is less when I'm writing 100,000 words every 2 months. I don't really have time to go to Staples.
I have one thing that I think I can tie together with some of my rhetorical theory and and what I observe amongst romance authors, because that's my main experience with other authors, is everyone's looking for this pain-free way to write.
Yeah, that's true.
And so even people who aren't specifically talking about, writing written by working authors and how to write by, an academic, they're all saying if you do it this way, everything will feel easy and fill in the blanks of your outline or your bubbles or whatever, and everything is practically painless. And every author is thinking that their process must be wrong because it's painful and hard. And I actually think that the pain and difficulty is simply whatever your process is. Those two things are a constant. It's
I
hard work.
I think that's huge. I think that's a huge thing to say and to know. And even though I've been at this really hard for a number of years now, it's a really good reminder. It's going to hurt, and that's just part of it. You're going to think you're doing it wrong. That's part of doing it right. You know, getting words on the page sucks.
It's hard.
But it
The
is the
elves
best.
do not work for me when I'm sleeping, or they kind of are.
Yeah, our brains do work when we're asleep. I believe
Yes.
that. Anything else we want to fill in at the end of this show here? I do have something exciting to show you, and if anybody's watching on the YouTube channel, we got our business cards. See? Pretty, huh?
Oh,
Yeah.
very pretty.
So we'll be handing these out at RWA National, which for listeners might be in the past while you're listening, but for us it's still coming up. Looking forward to that.
Well, in sum up, tell me if I'm wrong. Writing is hard work. If you're finishing the book, you're probably not doing it wrong.
Exactly.
Let's see. Romance has profitable niches, which is why it's a great place to succeed as an author. If you're not a romance reader and you don't love romance, you're probably going to have a hard time succeeding at writing a romance.
Mm-hmm.
So please, if you're coming into this genre, read widely, read across genre, read in those best ofs, and then deep dive.
Yeah.
If you come away feeling that all romance novels are written in first person, then you have not read enough.
Yeah.
Likewise, if you feel that romance novels are all written in the third person, you have not read enough to really absorb the broadness of the romance genre. Okay.
What's your week look like? What are you working on?
Well, I am working on rolling out right now a box set of my romance novellas. So that should be coming out this weekend.
Cool.
So there we go. What else? Continuing to finish revisions on Surrender to Ruin. It never goes as fast as I want it to.
I know. I agree. Revisions, I always, for some reason in my head, I can do revisions in a week. And that's never happened to anyone.
One time, with a book that was originally traditionally published, I got a letter from my editor that said, okay, here's your revision letters. Can I have this back in 3 days? And I'm looking at this. Yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm going 3 days. But I'm looking at her revision letter, and it was pretty clear to me that she probably only read about 50% of the book, and had not read any of the back half of it. So I'm going, okay. So I called my agent and said, kind of 3 days? I can't do that. Even if I were had 3 days off in a row where I had nothing to do revisions, I don't know that it would be possible to do revisions in just 3 days. I mean, you got to read the whole thing to make sure you didn't screw something up.
You're looking at every sentence,
So we did agree that I could have a week, and there was a 3-day turnaround because she was late. She took 6 months to get to the revisions. So that flowed down to me, and I ended up actually rewriting the entire back half of the book anyway. So, revisions are something that take time. But, what I turned into her was a book that I had already done, my self-editing on it. Right. And then it was coming back to it after a break. And, you get a fresh look at it and you go, oh, okay, I need to do this instead. And it went very quickly, but it wasn't 3 days, for goodness sake.
Nor should it be. Proofs can be 3 days,
So I don't even know what universe she was living in. I guess she was looking at her deadlines going, Carolyn can turn it around in 3 days. And it's well, okay, Carolyn probably could. She would kill herself doing it, but no. There has to be some. 3 days is not time to do a quality job.
No.
So I'm about halfway through the revisions, and I know it's already starting to speed up. So I think I'll be pretty fast through the rest of it, and I'm hoping to actually have something before I leave for RWA, which will be a week from today,
Yeah.
because I leave on Saturday morning. Because the board meets Sunday, Monday, with the possibility of Tuesday out there, so I'm
Yeah.
committed for the entire week. So that's kind of what's coming up for me.
I'm just writing a lot. I'm just writing, and I'm writing fast enough that I want to, because number one, this is my birthday week. So I'm going to take my 4th of July and my
Oh,
birthday
happy
off.
birthday!
Thank you. And also, I've decided that at RWA this year, I always go to RWA National, and I think I'm going to work there. I know a lot of people do. I have such a good time there that I don't work very well. So I'm going free and clear. I'm going to go to workshops. I'm going to hang out with friends, do some business stuff, and I'm going to be at the pool with SPF 4000. And I'm just going to kind of treat it like this little vacation. So I can't wait. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. I
Well,
remember one time an editor gave me revisions that had to be done right after RWA. So that was a conference where I was in my room
oh,
basically 95% of the time.
that's
And it wasn't
terrible.
very fun.
No,
And I kind of thought, what's wrong with you, editor? You know when RWA is. You know that I'm going because you've arranged for, invitations to publisher dinners. Why are you giving me revisions that have to be completed when you know I'm at a conference?
I got fired once at an RWA. I found out my contract wasn't being extended. That was an awesome year. But then there was another conference where I got a contract. So, and suddenly I was under contract again. So I don't know. It's the best.
The business of writing.
The
Uh,
vagaries. All right.
yeah.
Well, I wish you a very pleasant writing week, and and enjoy your new
Yes.
electric
Same to
car.
you. Thank you. It's charging as we speak.
That's amazing. It's a no. What? It's a Kia.
Kia.
That's right.
A Kia Soul.
Yay! Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
And
Well, everybody
I'll
else.
see you at RWA, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be filming there. In fact, we'll do a live
Yes.
segment or two.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, enjoy your writing week, and we will talk
Okay.
soon. Thanks for listening, listeners.
Okay.
Bye.